The desert stretched endlessly, scorched and golden under a cruel sun. Winds whispered across the dunes, lifting fine dust into the air like ghosts dancing over forgotten bones. The heat shimmered, warping the horizon, turning reality into a mirage. Beneath a dying acacia tree, a girl hung limply by her wrists, chained to its twisted trunk like an offering to the gods of cruelty. Her lips were cracked, swollen from thirst. Her arms were raw where the rusted iron bit into her skin. She had stopped crying hours ago. The tears had dried up long before the water in her canteen. Now, only the wind spoke, brushing against her face like a lullaby sung by death. The girl's name no longer mattered here. Not to the sky, not to the sand, but in her mind, it echoed faintly, Amara. She had whispered it to herself earlier, over and over, to remember she existed. But now it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else, someone who had lived in another world. The world before the chains. She didn't know how long she had been here. Time bent strangely when every minute felt like a lifetime. The sun had set and risen at least twice. Or was it 3 times? Her senses were crumbling, folding inward like dry leaves. Her throat burned with each breath. Flies buzzed near her mouth, unafraid of resistance. They had promised her safety. The men, her uncle, the laughter in their voices still rang in her ears. Just a ride to the border, they said. A good marriage. A better life. But what awaited her wasn't a wedding. It was this graveyard of sand and silence. No reason, no explanation, just chains and abandonment. At first, she had screamed, cried, begged, but only the wind answered. She fought the cuffs until her wrists bled. She called for mercy until her voice vanished into the dunes. And now, she waited. Not for rescue, but for the end. The sun dipped low, bleeding into the horizon. The sky shifted from white to amber to crimson. Her head drooped forward, too heavy to hold up anymore. Her knees buckled. The chain caught her. A metal tug that jolted her back to awareness. Pain flickered in her spine. She exhaled a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Then something changed. A low rumble. Faint. Distant. But different. Not the wind. Not her imagination. She forced her eyes open. They burned with dust and fatigue, but she saw it. Movement. A shadow against the light. Not an animal. Too tall. Too deliberate. A rider. He moved slowly through the haze, wrapped in a dark scarf that covered most of his face. A wide-brimmed hat cast his eyes in shadow. He rode a horse that looked like it belonged in another century, dust-covered, solemn, silent. The man didn't carry the arrogance of a bandit or the chaos of a lost traveler. He rode like a man who had seen too much and survived. Amara's pulse fluttered. Her cracked lips twitched. Was this real? Was this death, arriving on horseback? Or salvation? Or worse? The rider didn't speak. He dismounted with purpose, boots crunching the brittle earth. He stopped just a few feet away, standing before her like a judge before a sentence. She tried to speak. Nothing came. He pulled down his scarf. His face was weathered, scarred, hardened by fire and time. A jagged mark ran down his left cheek, disappearing under the collar of his jacket. His eyes were dark, not cruel, but unreadable, as if they'd once held hope and forgotten how. "You alive?" he asked. His voice was deep, calm, no urgency, no sympathy, just a question, direct, unemotional. She nodded. Barely. He looked at the chain, then back at her. "I don't break chains for free," he said. "If I do this, you owe me." She blinked. Was this another trap? "You understand?" She nodded again. She didn't care what the price was. She just didn't want to die like this. With a swift motion, he pulled out a bolt cutter from his satchel. Not a weapon, a tool. That surprised her. The metal groaned as he forced the jaws around the chain. With a crack, the link snapped. She collapsed to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. He knelt beside her, handed her a flask. Water. Cool. Real. She sipped, choked, coughed, then drank again. He watched her, but not like the others had. His gaze held no hunger, only calculation. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Amara." He nodded once. "You can walk." She tried to stand. Her legs trembled, but held. "Good. Come on. We don't stay here." She limped after him. Every step felt like walking on nails. But she didn't stop. Not now. Behind them, the acacia tree stood empty, its rusted chain hanging loose like a memory unraveling. As the sun vanished below the dunes, casting the desert into indigo silence, the girl followed the man into the unknown. She didn't know who he was or why he'd come, but something inside her whispered, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The cave was shallow, barely enough to shield them from the wind. Yet, compared to the open cruelty of the desert, it felt like a sanctuary. A small fire crackled in the center, casting flickering light across the rough stone walls. The man sat opposite her, legs crossed, sharpening a hunting knife with slow, practiced strokes. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate. It wasn't meant to intimidate, but it did. Amara sat wrapped in a coarse blanket he had given her. Her wrists throbbed beneath the cloth strips he'd used to bandage them. Each time she moved, the sting reminded her that her pain wasn't imagined. She was alive. Barely. He hadn't spoken much since rescuing her. He had offered water, food, and silence. At first, she welcomed the quiet. But now, in the dim glow of firelight, questions piled behind her cracked lips like stones threatening to fall. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He didn't look up, just kept sharpening. "I've seen too many corpses," he said. Didn't want to see another. She studied him. The way he moved, the way he sat, rigid but alert, like he could spring into motion at any moment. His coat was old military. Faded patches hinted at a past he didn't speak of. "You're a soldier," she said. "Was. What happened?" He finally looked up. His eyes were calm but worn, like a book left too long in the sun. "I got tired of obeying orders from men who didn't know what loss meant." She let his words settle. He didn't offer a name, and she didn't ask again. It felt understood. Names had power. And in places like this, power was dangerous. He reached into his pack and pulled out a folded cloth. Inside it was a necklace, a small silver pendant in the shape of a star. It was scratched, dulled, but unmistakably precious. He held it out. "You had this," he said. Amara frowned. "No, I didn't." He nodded slowly. "I found it near the tree. Half buried. Probably dropped by one of the men." She stared at it. The star caught the firelight, gleaming faintly. "It belonged to my daughter," he said quietly. "Last time I saw her, she was wearing it." Amara's breath hitched. The fire crackled louder. "She was taken by the same kind of men who left you there," he continued. "Sold. Burned alive in a compound just across the border. They called it justice. I called it war." A hollow silence filled the space between them. He tucked the necklace away, as if it hurt to hold it too long. Amara stared into the fire. Her mind drifted backward, to a small room with a dirt floor and walls that peeled in the heat. Her parents had been kind. Poor, yes, but kind. Her mother had always sung to her while making bread. Her father had smelled of engine grease and oranges. Then the fire came. She didn't see who started it. Only the flames, and the men with guns yelling names she didn't understand. Her parents were gone before sunrise. The village buried them in sand and silence. She'd gone to live with her uncle, who rarely looked at her unless something needed cleaning or carrying. Then one day, he smiled in a way he never had before and told her to wear her best dress. That was the beginning of the end. "They said I was going to be married," she whispered. The man didn't react. "I believed them. I thought it meant safety, belonging." Her voice cracked. "Instead, they took me into the desert. Said they'd come back. They never did." He didn't offer pity, just nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "You remember their faces?" he asked. Amara nodded. "Two of them. One had a scar on his chin. The other smelled like kerosene. Always carried a blade in his boot." "That's enough," he said. Sometimes justice starts with a face. She looked up, confused. What do you mean? He stood, tossing another piece of wood into the fire. I've been tracking men like them for years. One by one. Names don't matter, only what they've done. And I go where the fire leads. The way he spoke, it wasn't with rage. It was with precision. Cold. Measured. Like he'd already buried the part of him that could feel. But why keep going? She asked. What does it give you? He hesitated, then sat down again. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I'm trying to build something out of the ashes. Maybe I'm just chasing ghosts. Amara didn't speak for a long time. The fire warmed her legs, but not her thoughts. A girl who had once dreamed of books and music now sat across from a man made of scars and vengeance. Yet, in the strangest way, she felt safe. You saved me, she said softly. He nodded once. No, I broke a chain. Saving you's up to you now. Something shifted in her chest. A flicker, not quite hope, but the memory of it. Outside, the wind had quieted. The stars above blinked in silence, watching without judgment. He looked toward the cave entrance, then back at her. We'll move before sunrise. Too many tracks in the sand. Amara nodded. She lay down, the blanket pulled close, her eyes still on the fire. It danced with life, with warmth, with warning. Tomorrow, they would leave. But tonight, for the first time in days, she was not alone. And she knew now, her story had not ended at the tree. It had only begun. The sun rose over the desert with a pale, indifferent glow. Amara stepped out of the cave, shielding her eyes against the early light. The wind had buried their footprints from the night before, erasing the trail like it was trying to protect them or hide them. She wasn't sure which. He was already awake, sitting on a ridge above the cave, binoculars pressed to his eyes, scanning the empty stretch of sand as if expecting something to rise from the earth. When she approached, he didn't look at her, but he passed the binoculars over without a word. What am I looking for? She asked. Patterns, he said. Movement. Threats. The things most people miss. She looked through the lenses, catching a shimmer in the distance. Just heat. No movement. But for the first time, she felt how exposed they really were. The desert wasn't just a place, it was a test. It either broke you or taught you how to endure. Back at the camp, he spread a map across a flat rock. It was worn and faded, marked with red circles and excess. She recognized one of the locations. It was near the village where the men had taken her. Another red circle stood out farther south. What's this one? She asked, pointing. Compound. Used to be a militia checkpoint, he said. Now it's a syndicate hub. Smugglers. Arms. People. The kind of men who sell girls for favors and bullets. Her fingers curled into fists. That's where we're going, he added. Soon. Why not now? You're not ready, he said simply. Amara bristled. You don't know what I'm ready for. He met her gaze without blinking. You've survived. That's not the same as fighting back. She didn't respond. But inside, something twisted. Not anger. Not shame. A realization. He wasn't trying to insult her. He was preparing her. Later that day, he began her training. It started with walking. Long distances, no stops. Then came lifting, stretching, learning how to balance her body under stress. She learned how to read the horizon, how to drink slowly so water lasted longer, how to judge wind by the feel of her own breath. By the third day, he placed a weapon in her hands. This is not for revenge, he said. This is for control. Of yourself. Of your choices. He showed her how to aim. How to breathe with the rhythm of the trigger. How to hear the sound between sounds. The echo of danger. She was clumsy at first. Shaking. Scared. But not of the gun. Of failing in front of him. Still, he never raised his voice. Never rushed. Each time she stumbled, he corrected her with calm, sharp words that stuck like thorns. Every time you miss, he said once, imagine someone like you is chained to another tree. Ask yourself if you're okay with letting them die. That stayed with her. One night, while tending the fire, she looked up at him and asked, Why me? He didn't answer right away. Just poke the coals and watch the sparks drift upward. Because the world needs witnesses, he finally said. Not victims, not heroes, just people who remember what the fire felt like and choose to walk through it anyway. She nodded. It made sense, in a way only pain could understand. On the 6th night, he handed her a sheet of paper. 3 names. She recognized one, the man with the scarred chin. They're in the southern camp, he said. Security's loose. They trust the desert to protect them. That's their mistake. Her breath quickened. The name pulsed on the page like a wound reopened. We don't go in guns blazing, he continued. We go in quiet. We find the girl they're holding. We end it. Clean. There's a girl? He nodded. 15. Maybe younger. Was taken last week. Amara didn't ask how he knew. He had his ways. The kind of knowledge people only got from pain, persistence, or both. The next morning, they set out. No horses. Just silence and dust. By sunset, they reached the edge of a crumbling ridge overlooking the camp. It was smaller than she'd expected. 3 huts, a watchtower, a truck with a flat tire. But it radiated menace. Laughter drifted up from below, drunk, careless, human. He studied the guards through his scope, then handed it to her. See that? He asked. She followed his direction. One of the men by the fire wore a boot with a metal tip. Her heart froze. That was him. Kerosene breath. Blade in the boot. She nodded. You sure? Yes. He lowered the scope and looked at her, not with approval, but with a seriousness that gripped her. This won't make you whole, he said. Killing him. But it might give you space to become whole. She didn't speak. Words felt small next to what was coming. That night, under cover of darkness, they moved. Step by step, breath by breath. The sand crunched softly beneath their boots. A dog barked once, then stopped. The firelight from the camp flickered against the rock walls. They reached the edge of the fence. He motioned for her to wait, but she placed a hand on his arm. He turned. Let me do it, she whispered. Please. He hesitated, then stepped aside. She crept forward, silent as a ghost. Her heart thundered, but her grip was steady. She found him, sitting alone, muttering to himself, drunk. She raised the weapon. Her finger hovered. He looked up. Recognition flickered in his eyes. No, he began. She didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she stepped back. I'm not you, she said, and vanished into the shadows. She returned to the man, breath ragged. You didn't do it, he said, not surprised. I didn't need to, she replied. He nodded. They walked away, not as fugitives, but as something stronger. Not broken. Becoming. The girl they rescued from the southern camp couldn't speak. Her voice had been taken by fear, or maybe by something worse. She clung to Amara's side, trembling even in her sleep. It reminded Amara of how she had once felt, like a shadow of a person, afraid her voice wouldn't matter even if she found it. They sheltered that night beneath a broken sandstone ridge. The man, as always, built the fire just high enough for warmth, never enough for attention. He checked his rifle, cleaned the blade. Quiet, methodical. But when his eyes drifted toward the 2 girls curled beneath a blanket, something softened. He didn't speak of it. He never did. But Amara noticed it. He wasn't just fighting monsters. He was searching for what he'd lost. She sat beside him after the girl fell asleep. I didn't kill him, she said. I know, he replied. He deserved to die. He nodded, but not in agreement, more in understanding. But I needed to be the one who didn't become what he was, she continued. I didn't want to win by losing myself. He looked into the fire. That was the part one failed. She waited. My daughter, he said. When I found the man who ordered it, the fire, the burning, I didn't hesitate. I made him scream. But afterward, I didn't feel justice. I felt emptier than before, like I'd burned another piece of myself just to feel alive. Amara looked down at her hands. They were calloused now, stronger, but they still trembled when she thought of the tree, of the chain, of the silence. I thought surviving would be the hardest part, she said. It's not, he replied. Living after, That's where the real battle begins. The next morning, they buried the pendant. He handed it to her, the small silver star that once hung around his daughter's neck. Amara had kept it close since the cave, tied to a string around her wrist. She stared at it for a long time. She'd want someone to carry it, he said. She already did, Amara replied. Now it's time to let it rest. They chose the tree, the same tree where he'd found her. The chain was gone, buried deep in the sand, rusted links swallowed by the earth. In its place, they dug a small grave, unmarked but sacred. Amara placed the pendant inside. No words, just the soft sound of earth returning to itself. They stood in silence. A wind moved through the branches, dry, but not cruel. It felt different now, like the desert had offered a kind of peace, rough and unforgiving, but real. He turned to leave, but she didn't follow. I'm not going back with you, she said. He paused, hand resting on the saddle. I figured, he said. Where will you go? Wherever there's someone still in chains. He looked at her, not with surprise, but with the faintest trace of pride. Not the loud kind. The kind that only men like him could carry, wounded, buried deep, but genuine. You're not ready, he said, echoing his words from days ago. No, she said, but I wasn't ready for the desert either. And I survived that. He stepped forward, placed a small leather pouch in her hand. Inside was a folded map, a compass, and a single silver bullet. For when the chain returns, he said. She nodded. The girl they had saved would go with him. Amara knew it instinctively. The child needed time, care, someone who could protect without asking too much. Amara was not that person, not yet. She was still a storm finding its direction. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. But before they parted, he said one final thing. People will forget your name, but not what you stood for. That's the kind of legacy that outlives history. She watched him ride away, the child asleep against his shoulder. The dust of his departure rose, danced, and then disappeared. Amara turned her back to the wind and walked into the horizon. Weeks passed. She moved from town to town, following whispers, broken roads, and half-truths. She freed 3 more girls, each from a different kind of prison. Some had been sold. Others had run. All were alone. Amara didn't call herself a savior. She didn't want to be one. She was just a girl with scars and a compass, guided not by rage, but by memory. One evening, she sat by a new fire, hands steady as she stitched a torn blanket. Across from her, a young girl she had found just days ago stared into the flames with wide, uncertain eyes. Amara leaned in gently. You're safe now, she said. The girl didn't respond, but her fingers unclenched. That was enough. The night sky shimmered with stars. Above her, the heavens offered no answers, only witness. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a single rusted chain link. Not as a trophy, as a reminder of who she had been and who she would never be again.